Welcome back to our continuing YouTube video series on commercial leasing. My name is Christopher Neufeld of Neufeld Legal, a corporate commercial lawyer with considerable experience in the realm of commercial leasing. In this particular YouTube video, we're going to look at 15 strategic tips when looking to undertake a commercial real estate lease. Tip number 1. Evaluate your specific business needs. Understand what you are looking for in the commercial property before you commit to any particular property. You have to understand what you need and what you don't need, what is excessive and what is appropriate. You need to spend the time to study your specific needs. Tip number 2. It is always recommended to engage a lawyer. Typically, you're going to be looking for a lawyer in your local jurisdiction and one who has considerable knowledge and experience in the realm of commercial leasing. Tip number 3. Calculate all your costs prior to committing to a lease. Understand what the actual costs are, what the hidden costs are, what the escalation clause is, what the variable costs are, and what costs have a tendency to change year over year. This is particularly important in a triple net lease, where you have the concept of additional rent, where you're carrying the full operating costs of the landlord, which are split proportionally. This is an indeterminate cost at the time of each year. But what you can do is request the previous year's additional rent charges and attempt to make an assessment as to what the year-over-year operating costs could possibly escalate with various indices of inflation. Tip number 4. Understand your leasing options and the relative differences between the leases. Typically, in the larger commercial landlord locations, you are looking at a triple net lease consisting of both a base rent and additional rent. The additional rent is utilized to ensure the landlord is able to transfer all its operating costs onto its tenants. The other common alternative, but not so common with larger landlords, is a gross lease, possibly in a subleasing arrangement where you're paying one single fixed price monthly and there is no variance month over month because of discrepancies. But this is usually due to the fact that you're dealing with a smaller size lease location and a smaller building or leasing arrangement. Tip number 5. Check market rents. You want to compare and make sure that you are not overpaying for the particular area. And if you can get something at a better price with some modification as to location or building type, that is always something to consider. Tip number 6. Research the property. Make sure you understand the property. Find out what the pros and cons are, why people continue to be in the property, and why former tenants have left. Assess the property at various hours of the day and various days of the week. Make a determination not on what you see on a singular time, but over time, times that are going to reflect what your customers or your staff are going to be faced with. Tip number 7. Negotiate leasehold improvements. Especially when with respect to new buildings, you need to fit the entire building with leasehold improvements and fixtures such that you should be negotiating to get some viable arrangement with the landlord which is an adjunct to financing. And this leads into tip number 8, which is to seek tenant inducements. Tenant inducements are arrangements either initial free rent period at the commencement of the lease term, or effectively financing the fixturing and leasehold improvements in the building, such that you are paying a slightly higher lease rate over the period, but your initial costs are reduced, given the fact that in any launch of a new location and operation, there are going to be some significant costs that are going to be incurred outside of the building, and the lease arrangement that you as a business owner are going to have to incur. Tip number 9, understand your contractual obligations. You want to understand what you're getting into, what restrictions you have, what obligations you have, how you can terminate, and how you can be found in default. Tip number 11, get flexibility in your lease arrangement to the extent that that's possible. You want to look to both ensure that you have the ability to sublet and to transfer appropriately to a new tenant should the need arise. There is also the possibility with certain landlords to negotiate early exit clauses. However, where there are early exit clauses, there are often penalties associated with those early exits. Tip number 12, check for a competitor clause. A competitor clause relates to your use of the location, such that you do not want to go into a particular building and 6 months later or 2 years later find that the landlord is capable of contracting another premises within that very same building to a competitive business. You won't necessarily be able to stop somebody across the street from launching a competitive business, but at minimum you want to constrain the landlord from putting in another competitive business to the extent that that is possible. Tip number 13, look at your renewal arrangements. Understand how you can renew or extend the term at the end of the current term, as well as understanding and calendaring the timelines for that renewal or extension, such that you are not in default or otherwise fail to initiate the renewal at the time point that it is required. Tip number 14, and this is a very, very important tip, don't be too quick to sign the lease agreement. Which leads into tip number 15, but remember, don't be too quick, because if it is not the right lease arrangement, you really need to prepare to walk away from the lease. And number 15, make sure you negotiate effectively, and what you do negotiate for is contained in the lease agreement that you sign off with the landlord. The last thing you want to do is negotiate terms and then allow the landlord to push it back to their lawyers, write it up, and inadvertently or not, have alternate terms included in their standard form of lease and not contain the terms that you negotiated. And you failed to apprise your lawyer or yourself as to these modifications and have yourself committed to their ever more onerous form of lease. Now, those are 15 key strategic tips that I provided you with. Naturally, Every lease arrangement is specific and is a lease unto itself, such as always recommended that you engage knowledgeable and experienced legal counsel to assist yourself with. However, you also want to take responsibility for your own leasing arrangements, and in turn we have created this series of videos which we hope you like and you continue to subscribe to help you better prepare and negotiate for your own commercial real estate lease. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.